already working our way through a busy week. Yes, the calendar says June, but mandatory minicamps, 9 of them this week. There will be more coming up next week. The offseason program's getting intense. Competition, no contact, but it's still some fierce competition at these off-season workouts, and specifically at mandatory minicamps. We talked last hour about guys like Tom Brady showing up, Le'Veon Bell showing up, a couple of guys in Detroit not showing up. Darius Slay and Damon Snacks Harrison will skip the mandatory minicamp at the price of $88,650. But, this is the centerpiece. And really, Chris, for years, this is all they did in the offseason. They would do a minicamp, and that's it. And now it's this 9-week ordeal aimed at keeping the guys in shape, even though most of them already staying in shape.
Well, yes, they are, but at the same time, I think this is why we see so many injuries through OTAs too, because guys aren't good enough shape yet to be going out in the field and doing pass rush drills or one-on-one drills. I mean, hey, 3 out of the top 7 picks in our last NFL draft are hurt and can't even practice already because they had injuries right off the bat. So I do think there's a little bit too much of a rush always to get out there in these OTAs and do that this day and age, where, like you said, back 80s, 90s, it was just the mini camp, and you got the rest of the offseason to train. But it's still a very important part of the year. Glad to see Brady, Le'Veon Bell there. Certainly, especially Le'Veon Bell. He'll back some of the people in New York off of him a little bit.
And back in the 60s and 70s, the players had other jobs in the offseason. They didn't stay in shape. The cleats got thrown into the closet, and then when it was time to go to training camp, they had to work and work.
Yeah.
They had to put down the cigarettes. They had to work. They had to put down the brisket. They had to work to get themselves into shape. And they had 6 preseason games. Back when there were 14 regular season games, Chris, there were 6 preseason games. In 1978, they moved that point from 6 and 14 to 4 and 16. And it's been nearly a decade now that the commissioner periodically questioning the value of 4 preseason games. He was at it again on Monday at the Jim Kelly annual golf tournament in Buffalo. Here's what the commissioner had to say about the current slate of 4 preseason games.
Talking to the coaches, if 4 preseason games is necessary anymore to get ready for a season, to evaluate players, to develop players. There are other ways of doing that. And we've had a lot of discussions about that. And, I feel like what we should be doing is always of the highest quality. And I'm not sure preseason games meet that level right now.
He's been saying that for 10 years, although he hasn't said it much recently. Here's the thing, Chris. The NFL wants to move that point again. It went from 6 and 14 to 4 and 16. They want to move it to 2 and 18. They're not going to reduce the preseason without increasing the regular season. And it is not a coincidence that Roger Goodell is making these comments publicly less than a week after reports emerged that the NFL wants to get 18 regular season games as a result of the ongoing labor negotiations with the NFLPA. This is the push. And whenever Roger Goodell assaults the preseason, the message is, we want more regular season games. And that's what is driving this periodic questioning of the value and the quality of the preseason. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the dollars that are talking, and it's 2 extra games of, yes, a TV deal. You talked about with the legal gambleizing, last hour that, okay, 2 more games of, 16 games per week of more gambling, more action, more cash in the pockets of everybody. So that's certainly the end goal. They're not fooling anybody that way. Now, to his points about the preseason being a little pointless, agreed with him 100%. Again, this is a deep topic, really. But the preseason game is really more risk than reward at this point right now. And we've seen some of the successful teams in football the last few years really play very little in the preseason. Maybe 1 series, 2 series a game with their starters, things like that. But I think ultimately, too, if you're not going to have preseason games, because these are one of the few times that guys, you really get a chance to tackle and work on some of the things maybe you can't work on practice on a consistent basis, they're going to have to, the players, everybody's going to have to find a way. Some concessions are going to have to be made about practice and being able to simulate some more game-like instances and practices, maybe to take away, to take the place of the preseason, and of course not injure superstars and meaningless preseason games and do things like that. But I think something has to be done there to get those useful full pads physical reps?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, ultimately, you don't want to be gambling with the health of your key players. I mean, really, you never want to be gambling with anything.
Did I say gambling?
I
did say
you've
that.
added a word to the Chris Sims
when it
lexicon.
came out of my mouth, I was like, wait, I don't think I said the right thing there. Yes. Legalize gambling.
What we have seen in recent years, and this makes it harder to sell a 4-game preseason. And look, the cynical side of me is thinking there's some coordination between the league office and some of these teams. Like, let's make the preseason even more meaningless by not playing the starters. Do you really need to play the starters? More and more talk by guys like Chargers coach Anthony Lynn about not playing his starters very much at all in the preseason. Sean McVay doesn't play his starters very much in the preseason. They made it to the Super Bowl last year. I remember saying last year, this is going to be a good litmus test on whether or not you should rest your starters in the preseason. The Rams were great last year, wire to wire, and made it to the Super Bowl. So there is something to be said for not playing your starters in the preseason, but the fewer the starters play, the fewer reps they take, the harder it is to convince people to show up and buy those tickets. And it puts more pressure on the union to agree to reduce the preseason and increase the regular season. And this is not a bargaining chip for the league. They really want 18 regular season games. They've wanted it for a decade. And now that legalized gambling is spreading, and it's going to be 30 states, I think, within the next couple of years or more.
Yeah.
They want games to bet on that people care about, not these meaningless games that only the degenerates bet on. They want games that count, that people will be betting on in much greater quantities and much greater people involved in putting the money down, whether it's on the outcome of the game, whether it's the prop bets during the game. It's Soldier Field. They're going to have in-stadium betting. That is the ultimate dream for the NFL, to have the ability, people in the stadiums and at home, gambling on the games, and you want more regular season games. How I mean, with 4 preseason games, you mentioned the possibility of, okay, and if it shrinks or whatever, more opportunities to evaluate the team. But, where do you strike that balance if you're a coach right now? How much do you expose your starters in a 4-game preseason to injury? Are guys like Anthony Lynn and Sean McVay doing it right? Or should they be using their guys a little bit more?
No, I think they're doing it right. I felt like last year in general, throughout the preseason, we saw less starters play than ever before because they're just too worried about losing some of these key players for, of course, the real meat and potatoes, which is the regular season. Last hour I mentioned a little bit about, the rosters, and, some people go, oh, well, what about, some of these guys trying to earn spots? They need preseason games. Baloney. The 53-man roster, I'm just telling you, 48, 47 spots out of the 53 spots are already filled before training camp starts. It's just going to be 2 or 3 position battles here and there, maybe a diamond in the rough, somebody that just pops during training camp where they go, whoa, where the heck did this guy come from? But really, the roster's made up by the time you go to training camp. So it's really just about the ability to get your team to get it to the highest level it possibly can be by week 1. And, we've heard a lot of coaches complain. It's hard right now to get your team totally ready and where the coaches want them to be with the current practice status. So if you're not going to play the preseason games, and if you're going to be one of those teams that keeps your starter out of preseason games, what do? Guys like McVay, Anthony Lynn, they make practice more intense. They do it that way because then the players know they got games to rest altogether. To me, the big thing too going forward, and if the NFL wants to make the preseason still conversational to where they can make it interesting for fans and everything too. Again, this is New England who started this, but again, it's WWBD. What would Belichick do? Okay, Belichick started the Pats preseason practice scrimmages, right, Mike? We see that every year. The Pats link up with 1 or 2 teams. They go somewhere. They have a team come up and visit them. That's the best way I see right now to get quality practice reps for your football team to get them prepared. First of all, it's fresh blood you're going against, right? You're not going against your guys every day. So that's great. Your scout team is not having to run scout team reps. You have the other team over there now. So when your defense comes off the field now, they can actually just come off the field and watch Tom Brady in the offense, right? And not have to run the scout team and wear themselves down into the ground even more over meaningless reps that do nothing for them. So I think these are some of the avenues, at least that I've thought about, that would make sense. And I think that's maybe the future of preseason football as we go forward.
Yeah, even if there are fewer games, I mean, you do need to come up with a better way to ensure that teams are ready when the regular season begins. Look at the Patriots every year. They go through that struggle early on where the offensive line play maybe isn't where it needs to be because they haven't had the opportunities. And this is going to be a delicate part of the balance for the NFL and the NFL Players Association because the NFLPA is not going to want to give back the gains that were made in 2011 by way of reduced practice time. And it's going to be hard enough to get them to go to 18 regular season games. 18 regular season games plus more intense practice time, that's not going to go over very well either. So there's a lot of different ways this can play out. But we are seeing a de-emphasis on the preseason. And yes, it's being driven by money, but it's going to be for the coaches to come up with ways to get these guys ready to go. And at some level, the players need to be willing and interested in going along with whatever systems are in place to ensure that they're ready to go when the games begin that count.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.